On the morning of April 11th, 2025, something extraordinary happened. The air in Vatican City was still yet filled with anticipation. The sunlight that filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Peter's Basilica looked like rays from heaven itself. The walls of the basilica, ancient and filled with centuries of history, echoed with a silence that felt powerful. Every eye was fixed on the central balcony. Every camera, every television, every phone screen was tuned in. Across the world, people watched in silence as Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle stepped forward, now carrying a new title. On that day, he became Pope Luis XIII, the first Filipino pope, the first Asian pope in the entire history of the Church. It was a moment of quiet power. He was not a man of loud gestures or dramatic statements, but the very sight of him standing there, smiling gently, filled millions with hope. The Church had seen many leaders come and go, but this one felt different. Not because he wore new robes or stood under new lights, but because of what he represented. For many, Pope Luis XIII stood not just as a religious figure, but as a symbol of change, of inclusion, and of hope. His story wasn't built in the halls of power, but in the streets of Manila, in simple chapels, and in the voices of the ordinary faithful. From the very beginning of the ceremony, it was clear that something remarkable was taking place. The atmosphere inside the basilica was both sacred and modern. Ancient Latin chants filled the air, reminding everyone of the Church's deep roots. But at the same time, the presence of global media and live broadcasts connected this event to every corner of the earth. This wasn't just a coronation. It was a moment where past and future met in the heart of the present. Pope Luis XIII stood on that balcony, not as someone raised above others, but as someone who had walked beside them. His journey had been shaped by real people and real struggles. He grew up in Manila, a place where life moves fast and challenges are many. From his early days, he understood poverty, hardship, and the power of faith to keep people going. As a young priest, he served in crowded neighborhoods, listened to stories of pain, and shared meals with those who had nothing. His hands had touched the sick, comforted the grieving, and lifted the spirits of the forgotten. As he rose through the Church, he never lost that touch. Even as he became Archbishop and then Cardinal, he stayed grounded. He preached not only with his words, but with his presence. He was known to laugh easily, to listen carefully, and to speak with humility. When he was chosen as the new pope, many people across the world, especially in developing countries, felt a deep connection. This was not just a leader for the Church in Rome. This was a shepherd for the entire global flock. And then came the moment that left the world stunned. After his warm greeting, after his expressions of unity and service, Pope Luis XIV paused. The square fell into an even deeper silence. You could almost feel the hearts of millions beating at once, and then he said the words that no one expected: "A new covenant rises." 4 words, simple, clear, and yet full of meaning. The reaction was immediate. People looked at one another. Commentators froze mid-sentence. Phones lit up with messages and questions. What did he mean? A new covenant? Was this a change in doctrine? A new vision? A spiritual revolution? Those 4 words echoed like thunder across the world. But the Pope did not explain them further. He simply smiled, gave his blessing, and stepped back. In that moment, the mystery began, and with it came endless questions. What is this new covenant? Why now? What does it mean for the Church, for the faithful, and for the future? Some people felt excitement, others felt confusion. A few were even concerned. But everyone agreed on one thing. This was not an ordinary statement. This was a vow, a sacred promise, one that demanded reflection. In the days that followed, every major newspaper, every religious scholar, every ordinary believer had something to say. Some saw it as a powerful symbol of change. They believed Pope Luis XIII was calling for a return to the heart of the faith, a faith rooted in simplicity, in compassion, and in service to the poor. They imagined a church that no longer focused on wealth, power, or politics, but on kindness, humility, and grace. Others believed the new covenant referred to global unity. In a world filled with division between nations, religions, and communities, They saw this as a call for healing, a promise that the Church would now work harder to bring people together, no matter their background or beliefs. Still others thought it meant personal renewal. In a time when many people feel lost or disconnected, the new covenant could be an invitation to look inward, to reflect on life, on purpose, and on the soul. A reminder that faith isn't always about loud proclamations or rituals, but about living with love, honesty, and care. But as many discussed, others waited. They wanted answers. They hoped the Vatican would clarify. But the Pope remained quiet. He offered no follow-up statement, no press release, no detailed explanation. And perhaps that silence was part of the message, because sometimes the most powerful changes do not come with announcements or instructions. They come with reflection. They come with quiet. Decisions made in private moments. They come with people choosing to live differently, not because they were told to, but because they were inspired to. And Pope Louis XIII had always believed in that kind of transformation. He had spoken in the past about the value of silence, of listening, of asking questions. He often said that the Church must be a place where questions are welcomed, not feared, where the search for truth is honored, where the heart leads as much as the mind. And so, the new covenant became not just a phrase, but a journey. One that each person would walk in their own way. For some, it became a reason to return to church. For others, it became a spark to help their neighbors, to speak kindly, or to forgive someone they hadn't spoken to in years. In that sense, the Pope's words became more than a mystery. They became a mirror. They showed people what they valued, what they hoped for, and what they needed. And isn't that what faith is meant to do? Inside the Vatican, life continued. Pope Louis XIV went about his duties. He met with leaders, comforted the sick, and continued to speak about service, unity, and love. He did not change the rules of the Church overnight. He did not rush to make headlines, but in small and quiet ways, he began to shape something new. He visited prisons, not just to preach, but to listen. He met with leaders of other religions, not just to speak, but to learn. He spoke with children, the elderly, and those often forgotten. And in each of those moments, people felt the new covenant coming to life, not in grand changes, but in quiet acts of love. In churches around the world, people lit candles and prayed. In small chapels and large cathedrals, the words, "A new covenant rises," were written on walls, spoken in sermons and whispered in prayer. Some priests began to open their doors wider, welcoming those who had felt pushed away. Some parishes began to focus more on feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, and supporting those in pain. The Pope's vow had started a movement, not of protest but of compassion. For those who had lost faith in the Church, this moment felt like a new beginning. For those who had always believed, it felt like a renewal. And for those who were still searching, it offered a quiet hope. Pope Louis XIV had not promised riches or miracles. He had not declared new laws or written new rules. He had simply offered a vow, a sacred promise that something was beginning, something that asked for faith, not just in religion, but in humanity, in goodness, in kindness, in the possibility of something better. And as time passes, that vow continues to grow. It grows in the hands that feed the hungry, in the voices that call for justice, in the hearts that forgive, in the eyes that see the suffering of others and choose to help. It grows in silence, in reflection, and in prayer. The new covenant is not something that sits in the Vatican. It lives in the choices we make every day, in how we treat one another,